Hello and welcome to the Times of India. You watching Global Pulse with me, Neha Khanna. As heart-wrenching scenes of starvation and malnutrition continue to emerge from war-torn Gaza, some countries in recent days have come out and categorically stated that they will recognize the State of Palestine. Some of these countries, France, UK and Canada, are among Israel and the United States' closest allies. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer recently announced that his country will recognize the State of Palestine by September unless Israel takes substantive steps to end its war on Gaza and commit to a genuine peace process. Starmer's announcement is being seen as a significant change in British foreign policy. The British Prime Minister said, "I've always said we will recognize a Palestinian state as a contribution to a proper peace process at the moment of maximum impact for the two-state solution. With that solution now under threat, this is the moment to act." Starmer added, "As part of this process towards peace, I can confirm that the UK will recognize the State of Palestine by the United Nations General Assembly in September unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza." This statement was soon followed by Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney's announcement that Canada will recognize a Palestinian state at the United Nations General Assembly, adding that the move was predicated on the Palestinian Authority's commitment to much-needed reforms, including elections in 2026 and anti-corruption measures and a demilitarized Palestinian state. Canada has been saying for years that it would only recognize a Palestinian state at the conclusion of peace talks with Israel. But Prime Minister Carney said this week the reality on the ground, especially the mounting hunger crisis in Gaza, meant the prospect of a Palestinian state is literally receding before our eyes. Significantly, Carney also said, "Canada condemns the fact that the Israeli government has allowed a catastrophe to unfold in Gaza." These three US allies are now expected to join 147 other UN member nations in recognizing Palestinian statehood. There is growing outrage around the world over Israel's devastating war on Gaza. Scores of rights organizations have dubbed it an act of genocide and scorched earth tactics. Over 60,000 Palestinians have been killed in the Gaza Strip since Israel launched its offensive on the 7th of October 2023. And it's not just other countries and the United Nations. Some of Israel's own leading human rights organizations are now accusing their government of carrying out a genocide in Gaza. In a 28th July report titled "Our Genocide," an Israeli organization called B'Tselem says Israel's campaigns in Gaza reflect a coordinated effort to destroy Palestinian society. They have highlighted mass destruction, displacement, dismantling of infrastructure, and rhetoric from officials suggesting clear intent. Released on the same day, the organization's report, titled "A Health Analysis of the Gaza Genocide," states that Israel systematically destroyed healthcare facilities, blocked medical evacuations, and weaponized aid access. This pattern, combined with assaults on civilians, constitutes genocidal intent as per the Genocide Convention. The Israeli government has labeled the genocide claims as false and defamatory, calling them politically motivated and even anti-Semitic. But the fact is, the 2 million population of Gaza is starving. Scores of people, including children, have died from hunger and malnutrition. People have collapsed in the streets from exhaustion. In one instance after another, thousands of hungry, desperate, helpless Gazans have lined up to receive food and medicines at aid sites, only to be shot at by Israeli defense forces. Many have been killed. Their only crime was begging for food while standing in long queues. Since Israel cut off aid to Gaza in March this year to try and force Hamas to release the remaining hostages, its effort to install its own distribution system has been extremely ineffective and marred by chaos and casualties, even as hunger continues to grow. While US President Donald Trump, too, has acknowledged the starvation in Gaza, with his own MAGA allies expressing strong concern, he continues to stand staunchly by Israel and its increasingly unpopular Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And amidst the worsening humanitarian crisis, both Israel and the United States have gone ahead and condemned countries that have decided to recognize Palestinian statehood. They have termed the move a reward for Hamas's terrorism and said such a move harms efforts to achieve a ceasefire and the release of the hostages. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has dismissed recognition of Palestinian statehood by these countries as irrelevant. So what does recognizing Palestine as a state really mean? As of now, the State of Palestine is recognized as a sovereign country by 147 of the 193 UN member states. That's about 75% of the international community. 3 other European countries, Spain, Ireland and Norway, officially recognized Palestine last year. According to experts, the recognition may have limited practical effect, but diplomatically it could be significant, potentially pressuring the United States, Israel's biggest backer, to reconsider its stance.
For the reasons I cited earlier, Canada intends to recognize the State of Palestine at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2025. This intention is predicated on the Palestinian Authority's commitment to much-needed reforms, including commitments by the Palestinian Authority's President Abbas to fundamentally reform its governance, to hold general elections in 2026 in which Hamas can play no part, and to demilitarize the Palestinian state.
I can confirm the UK will recognise the State of Palestine by the United Nations General Assembly in September unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza, agree to a ceasefire and commit to a long-term sustainable peace, reviving the prospect of a two-state solution.
What is the President's position on recognizing a Palestinian state, and will he recognize Israeli sovereignty in Judea and Samaria?
I can answer both of those questions for you. On the second question about a Palestinian state, the president expressed his displeasure and his disagreement with the leaders of France, the United Kingdom, and Canada. He feels as though that's rewarding Hamas at a time where Hamas is the true impediment to a ceasefire and to the release of all of the hostages. So to your first question, the president wants to see all of the hostages released. He cares deeply about this. He has met with many of the former hostages, many of the families of those who have loved ones who are still being held hostage in Gaza. I have met with them too. It is absolutely devastating what these poor people have been through, and the president is always thinking about them, and that's why he's designated his special envoy Steve Witkoff, who's doing a tremendous job to release the hostages and to end this conflict. But the president has always said the last remaining hostages, now there are 20 living hostages in Gaza, will always be the hardest because Hamas is unfortunately using these innocent people as bargaining chips. But nevertheless, we are committed to seeing this come to an end.
We wanted Israel to watch over it. Part of the problem is Hamas is taking the money and they're taking the food. But we gave $60 million a couple of weeks ago. Nobody said anything about it. Nobody said thank you. But I didn't need the thank you. I just wanted the people to get fed. And we're helping out financially with that situation. It's a terrible situation. So just to conclude, I want to thank everybody for being here.
Go straight across to our panelists. Joining me on Global Pulse tonight is Professor Scott Lucas, political scientist and founder of EA World View. He joins us from Wicklow Island. John Rosamando is a senior defense policy analyst. He joins us live from Washington, D.C. And completing the panel tonight is Dr. Wael Awad, senior journalist and West Asia expert. Gentlemen, welcome to Global Pulse. Professor Scott Lucas, let me start with you. Now, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is one of those leaders who has announced in recent days that his country has decided to recognize the State of Palestine by the United Nations General Assembly in the month of September unless Israel agrees to a ceasefire and can find a way to end what he described as an appalling situation in Gaza. Now, what's definitely very interesting is that in the last few days, the three countries that have come forward and said we're going to recognize Palestine, France, the UK and Canada, are all amongst the strongest Israel and United States allies. Do you believe that this could in some ways prove to be a game changer in this entire situation where we're watching helplessly people starving to death in Gaza, where there is global outrage against Israel's actions, and yet nothing seems to be changing on the ground?
I think there's a wider story beyond those three countries, and that is this week there was a conference under UN auspices of 17 nations, plus the Arab League, plus the European Union, to discuss a two-state solution. The other states involved, other European states, include my own, Ireland. It includes Spain and Norway, who have all recognized a state of Palestine. Importantly, you have Australia and New Zealand, who may soon join in recognition of the state of Palestine. Indonesia, also representing Asia. And then importantly, Gulf states and regional states. The Saudis, who've been very, very much pushing this initiative, Qatar, Egypt, and Jordan. In other words, these isn't just individual states making this move. You have a group of states who have been involved in this, and then you had 15 of these states who have written to others to say, we need to consider doing this. In other words, this is part of a multinational shift. For many years, people said, well, you can't recognize the state of Palestine. It will bias Israel-Palestinian negotiations. And what you see from many of these states, with the exception of the Trump administration, is we're not going to get those negotiations. Israel's not going to move to them in the near term. So you need to make the symbolic move of recognizing the state of Palestine to put a marker down. And why did they do this? I think the turning point was at the start of March. There was a phase one ceasefire in place. Israel refused to extend that into a phase two. Instead, they have developed a plan for a long-term occupation of Gaza. And at the same time, as they refused to go into phase two, they cut the aid into Gaza. They blocked UN, they blocked humanitarian organizations going in there. They set up this absolute sham operation called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation through venture capitalists that wound up getting almost 1,000 Gazans killed so far, and that have put the country not just on the brink of famine. This is now, according to medics, according to humanitarian workers, according to certain states, this is now a de facto famine. And I think this became too much for many countries, even as, and I must emphasize this, those countries recognized and reiterated in the past week that Hamas cannot govern Gaza. What happened in October 2023 ruled Hamas out, ever ruling that country. So there has to be an alternative government in Gaza. And at the same time, there has to be a recognition of the state of Palestine.
All right. You've made some very important points. Fact of the matter is that to deliberately starve the people of Gaza is absolutely unconscionable. And that's exactly what Israel is being accused of now. It's difficult to even look at the heart-wrenching pictures that are coming out of Gaza. Those little children, the malnourished children who have been begging for food along with their families. There are scores and scores of families that haven't eaten for days. People have literally starved to death. People are collapsing in the streets of Gaza from hunger and utter exhaustion. Really, what's happening there is absolutely unconscionable, but Israel really willing to address it. Let me take this to John Rosamando. John, while President Trump said just a couple of days ago that, he is disturbed by the starvation that we see unfolding in Gaza. He said they've got to give them food. But at the same time, he staunchly continues to support Israel's increasingly unpopular Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in his prolonged war against Gaza. And At a time when Israel clearly risks becoming an international pariah, it is now being accused of carrying out a genocide and war crimes, not just by other countries in the United Nations, but by its own human rights organizations. Do you not believe that for the United States to continue to offer unqualified support to Netanyahu, sends out a very wrong message? Even the fact that these countries, and yes, they happen to be some of the United States' closest allies, have decided to recognize Palestinian statehood, has evoked a sharp rebuke, not just from Israel, but also from President Trump, who says they're all rewarding Hamas for its terrorism. But fact of the matter is that this stand now seems completely untenable, not just for Israel, but also for the United States.
Well, let's look at the history here, Rob. We've sent billions and billions of dollars of aid to the Palestinian Authority for decades now, and what do we have instead of support for building an infrastructure for the Gazans? Hamas built terror tunnels. Hamas uses hospitals and uses human shields. Hamas, according to even UN reports, has been stealing food aid. So I think that we need to be looking at a more balanced approach here. Recognition of a Palestinian state. The PA claims ownership of the 1948 territories, Israel itself. I mean, the whole idea of a two-state solution is rejected by the Palestinians themselves. So
That's not true.
It absolutely is true. You're not reading.
No, it's false.
Professor.
It's false.
No, Professor.
It's false.
You're not reading.
I'll let you continue, but it's false.
The 1948 territories. They claim ownership of the 1948 territories. So, neither the Palestinians nor the Israelis really want a two-state solution. Let's deal with that fact. Hamas wants to replace Israel with the caliphate. That you can say it's false, but I've read the primary source information. If
you misread it then.
I've read the primary source information.
Okay, frankly, when John says that even the Palestinians do not want a two-state solution, I would have to beg to differ. But this isn't just about history, which I know is very complex between these two peoples. It is about what's happening at the moment in Gaza. People are literally starving to death. And most people now are accusing Israel of deploying it as a starvation strategy. This is not me. This is countries around the world saying it. This is the United Nations saying it. This is Israel's own human rights organizations that are now saying it. They are accusing their own government of committing genocide and war crimes. Let me bring in Dr. Wael Awad at this point. Dr. Awad, there's a lot to discuss here. First and foremost, what do you make of the fact that even though we already had a situation where 147 members of the UN General Assembly had sort of recognized Palestinian statehood, now you have G7 countries, you have some of Israel and United States' closest allies, like the United Kingdom, France, and Canada, saying we cannot let what's happening in Gaza continue. It is unconscionable. We cannot let this go on. They've called the situation absolutely appalling. They have criticized Netanyahu, and now they have gone ahead and said, we are going to recognize the state of Palestine. Israel says, you're rewarding Hamas for its terrorism. And that's the stand that's been taken by Donald Trump too. What do you make, sir, of these developments of the last few days? How significant are these?
Well, I think it's not a few days. It has been a 75 years ongoing that Israel have been deceiving the world that it is the victim of the Arab world and they are being not recognized by the Arab country. They wanted to live peacefully in this part of the world. They have already, Balfour Declaration 105 years ago, they have given the Israelis the right of existence in homeland in Palestine without recognizing the Palestinian state. All this is really give you a clear indication that you cannot close your eyes what's happening in Gaza now, because the rest of the world have been ignoring since the 7th of October 2023, where everybody was justifying Israel attack on Hamas, saying that yes, it is committed a genocide, committed a crime, a terror attack on Israel. They deserve to be punished. But I think with the starvation, it's a clear indication that the real political objective of Israel has been exposed. And we cannot defend anybody who tried to defend Israel at this stage. He will be at the other side of history. And it's a shame on the international community that they are unable to bring peace and coexistence between two-state solution. Having said that, I would say that the American position and the American president, if he's distancing himself from the Macron and from the Prime Minister of Britain, it's a clear indication that the United States never been interested in a two-state solution, especially under Trump administration, because of the main reason that Israel is already dominating the American policy, and therefore no American president will be in a position to appease the Palestinian without giving the Israeli the upper hand to be the dominant militarily, politically, and economically in this part of the world. I think what's happening in Gaza, it should not also close our eye to what's happening in West Bank. If Israel is saying it is Gaza where Hamas have been doing all this, they said Hamas is making shelter under hospital, they destroyed the hospital. They said they are under the school, they destroyed the school. They are under the playground, they destroyed the playground. There is nothing left that we can say Hamas. Hamas is using civilians as a shelter to attack Israel. There is no shelter. There are people running with empty plate to go and run to bring aid and eat. People dying on the street. How much the world can really deny the fact that this is a genocide against Palestinian people? Look at what's happening in West Bank. West Bank, we have more than 120,000 Palestinians internally displaced in the camp of Palestine in the West Bank because of the Israeli settlers encroaching into their territories, occupying more territories of the Palestinian and also expanding at the cost of the Palestinian. More than 12,000 Palestinians in West Bank are in jail. More than 600 have been killed. More than 80 children have been killed. What Hamas has to do with that? So let us be very clear about it. I think it is our responsibility and accountability to tell to the world that this is a genocide against a Palestinian, and Israel cannot deny the right of existence of a Palestinian who has 6.5 million people living inside Palestine. Palestinians have the right to exist as much as the Israelis have the right to exist, coexisting side by side.
Yes, and I find it absolutely mind-boggling that there are still some Israelis, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who claim that all this talk about starvation and people dying in Gaza is exaggerated. I mean, you really would have to kill your conscience completely to even say something like that. Before I take this back to Professor Lucas and John, Dr. Awad, very quickly, I wanted your reaction to this one particular development, that I referred to. France, UK, Canada saying we're going to recognize Palestinian statehood. In your view, sir, to what extent does that strengthen the Palestinian cause, given that these are some of the closest Israeli and United States allies?
I think it's more of a symbolic. I have to say that, but because it also helped the world to focus more on the Palestinian issue, on the Palestinian people. I think the world must recognize that there was Aboriginal people living in Palestine and still existing in Palestine. You cannot deny the fact. And I think it is the responsibility of the British government, who have made that, as I said, 1917 Balfour Declaration, that they have given Israel a homeland but denied the Palestinian. I think it is the right time that they may be recognizing a Palestinian state. But having said that, I will always say that at the moment, what required is to stop the genocide, allow food to get into Gaza, and I think let the Palestinians live, at least survive. What is this? Whoever surviving the massacre that have been taking place, those who are not being killed by the guns, they are killed by hunger, and this should be stopped.
It needs to be stopped, and it's just unbelievable that we've seen horrifying images of people and little children queuing up at aid sites to collect food, and they've been fired at. Many of them have been killed just standing in queues begging for food. Okay, let me take this back to Professor Scott Lucas. Professor Lucas, Dr. Vailawat says that support that's now being extended to Palestine by countries like the UK, France, and Canada is more symbolic in nature than anything else. Firstly, what do you think recognizing Palestinian statehood would really mean? Most believe it'll have limited practical effect, but yes, diplomatically it could be a big boost for the Palestinian people. But more importantly, do you believe that it could pressure, if not Israel, at least the United States, into, maybe not offering its continued, unstinting, unqualified support to Israel, no questions asked?
Well, first of all, it's symbolism, because as Dr. Awad said, the priority is, and I think we all can agree on this, the priority is an unconditional ceasefire and the restoration of aid into Gaza. So in that sense, recognizing the state of Palestine is not going to deal with those immediate issues. Yeah. But it's important symbolism, because once we get that ceasefire, and we need that ceasefire, and once we get that aid going back in, it sets a marker then for the terms of discussions. The reason why, with respect, I push back on John is because, and I know he didn't mean to do this, but many have sort of pushed out this idea that you can ever have talks to have this two-state solution, because the Palestinians aren't really interested in it. Now, I know not just through friends, not just through colleagues, but I know through many Palestinian groups that they want a state in which they can live securely, and they realize that state is also alongside an Israeli state, which lives securely. There are issues around the Palestinian Authority, which John raises, which will have to be dealt with. And indeed, the countries have talked about this, that you need to talk about governance and reconstruction. You need to talk about reliable infrastructure. You need to talk about investment. But the problem at this point is what Israel and the Trump administration are trying to do, and we need to be honest about this, is to set up a different type of de facto situation. And that is no state of Palestine. Rather, we have an Israeli occupation that continues in the West Bank. And now we have an even stricter Israeli occupation in Gaza with 4 military zones and with Palestinians packed into areas in between those zones. That's an Israeli document. That's not me making this up. And so Israel's trying to create, or at least the Netanyahu government's trying to create its own reality here. Just a quick reminder, we had talks in 2000 that came close to getting this type of solution that we needed. We had a year of the Obama administration trying to broker this solution in 2009. It is possible to get back to that, but you must first acknowledge that Israel has to cease fire, has to open up the aid routes, and then you have to acknowledge firmly that both Israel and Palestine have the right to exist securely as states.
Okay, so John, let me come back to you at this point. Let's for a moment put aside these recent developments whereby countries that happen to be America's allies have said they're going to recognize Palestinian statehood. My question to you is simple and much more fundamental. And this is a question, John, that many Americans are also asking today, including some of President Trump's core MAGA supporters. They've expressed grave concern over the worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And frankly, you would have to be completely blind or without a conscience to not acknowledge what's happening in Gaza. My question is, has the time not come for the United States to crack the whip on its good friend and ally, Israel, and say enough is enough, this has gone way too far, we've stood by you every step of the way, and while we will continue to support you, the support should perhaps now be conditional. At the very least, shouldn't the Trump administration be putting immense pressure on the Netanyahu government and telling them, agree to a ceasefire now. Stop starving the people of Gaza. Give them food, give them aid, allow it to go through. Should America's support to Israel not be reassessed? Should it at the very least not be made conditional at this point in time? Like I said earlier, Israel is already becoming an international pariah, and this is not a good look for the United States of America either, the one country which ironically lectures the rest of the world the most when it comes to matters of human rights.
Well, let's put it this way. No one's coming up with a third option. The Palestinian Authority is not a reliable partner to govern Gaza or much of anything else. Second of all, if you look at what the Palestinians say in Arabic versus what they say in English, they lie in English and talk about their desire for a one-state solution in Arabic. Thirdly, if you look at you had ceasefires 2008, you had ceasefire 2014, 2018, 2021. Hamas violated the last ceasefire when it launched the attack on Israel on October 6th. The only thing that a ceasefire will do is provide Hamas with chances and opportunities to rearm. Israel abandoned Gaza in 2005 to the Palestinian Authority. It was overthrown and turned into a terrorist emirate by Hamas. So why don't we talk about maybe some sort of alternative governance of Gaza by, say, the Arab League or some other third party, because the Palestinian Authority is not a reliable partner.
Okay, but John, I have to ask you a follow-up question there. You know, each one of us condemned in the strongest possible terms the terror attack that was perpetrated by Hamas on southern Israel on the 7th of October 2023. But may we please remind ourselves that two wrongs do not make a right. Israel cannot act, in this inhumane fashion and justify it, citing the barbarism of Hamas, because Hamas is a terror organization recognized by the world, and Israel prides itself on being a civilized democracy. Surely a civilized democracy is expected to behave better than a terror organization. And we can go on talking about who should govern Gaza going forward, but even for us to get to that point, you have to first save those people of Gaza who are dying every day of starvation, of hunger, of malnutrition. So you did not actually address the question I put to you, John. You're saying a ceasefire is not a good idea, Hamas will just rearm. So is it then okay to let these people die of hunger?
Well, let's put it this way. If you look at what the Israelis are claiming, they're claiming there are thousands of trucks with food aid rotting that the UN and other organizations aren't bringing into Gaza. They say that,
and that is false.
That's not false.
It is false.
The United
It is. Don't put out disinformation. Identify it. Don't put out disinformation.
No, the United Nations shows that its food trucks have been looted. You have images of Hamas fighters in the tunnels gorging themselves on food that has been stolen. So
that's Israeli propaganda. You know that's Israeli propaganda.
Okay, it's not. You're speaking Palestinian propaganda. So if we look at the source of the information the world is relying on is the Palestinian Gaza Health Ministry run by Hamas, which has been shown to use incorrect numbers.
No.
Okay. John, out of respect for you, I did not want to interrupt you there. But, Professor Lucas and many others will dismiss that as sheer propaganda, because even if there have been some instances of looting here and there, I think the whole world can see the real picture, which is that it is really not Hamas which is starving these people to death. It is Israel's restrictions on the flow of aid which has created created a famine today in Gaza, a humanitarian crisis of mammoth proportions, shall we say of biblical proportions. Before I take this back to Dr. Wael Awad, Professor Scott Lucas, I know you feel very strongly about this and you wanted to come in there. You strongly disagree with what John said. Please go ahead, sir.
I'm just want to keep this on the basis of facts. And so before going to our friend Dr. Awad, the facts is that Israel in recent days has tried to cover for the fact that it almost completely cut off aid into Gaza since March by doing two things. The one is that they airdropped about 7 pallets of aid, which is less than a truck's worth of aid, as a photo opportunity. And indeed, as I speak to you right now, there's another photo opportunity going on now with Donald Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, being taken around to these aid points to say, look how wonderfully we're doing. Secondly, and this is serious, what happened is that the UN brought trucks to the border to be taken into Gaza in recent days. The Israelis delayed those trucks. There were about 1,000 of them on the border. They finally let about half of those trucks cross the border after protracted delays, but they did not provide for safe routes for the trucks to get to distribution points. And of course, if you don't have secure routes to get to the points, Palestinians can't get there to receive the aid. So when I'm saying to John is you have to cut through the Israeli propaganda to realize, in fact, and it is largely propaganda from the defense ministry, to say what the real situation here is. And the real situation, as you put it again, is we can talk about who should eventually govern Gaza, but you have an imminent crisis, which is one of starvation, which either Israel is causing or that it is enabling to happen. And the UN and other humanitarian organizations should go in now without Israeli restrictions.
All right. Thank you for that very important clarification, Professor Lucas, because people really need to know the truth of what's going on in Gaza. And it is ugly, it is abysmal, it is heartbreaking. And let's also remind ourselves that this new distribution, aid distribution system that Israel is trying to install in coordination with the United States, called GHF, let's face it, it's proved to be an absolute disaster. It is this new system that has led to the current situation where people are starving to death, dropping dead in the streets. Dr. Wael Awad, I have to wrap up this conversation. I will give you the last word. You know, all the talk about what a Palestinian statehood means aside, and yes, we will have the opportunity at some point in the future to talk about who should govern Gaza. But at this point in time, as has been pointed out by everyone, including yourself, there is a huge humanitarian crisis the people of Gaza are faced with. It's perhaps unlike anything we've seen in recent history. The question is, sir, what does the world, in your view, need to do to put more pressure on Israel and the United States to put an end to this genocide? I know our Israeli friends take strong objection when we use that term. They even consider it anti-Semitic. But I think most would agree that it's come to a point of genocide now. How do we get them to stop it? How do we get them to end the starvation crisis that's killing thousands and thousands of Palestinians?
I think the survival of Netanyahu is only depending on a prolongation of the war on Gaza, expanding it into Lebanon, maybe go to Iran, have a regional war, so his political survival is there. And with respect to what John has said, let me clarify 2 or 3 points, which is very important for our viewers also to share with. First of all, the Palestinians in Gaza are 75% of them are actually refugees or survivors of other genocide took place in Palestine and took shelter in Gaza. Therefore, the Palestinians in Gaza are nothing but a survivor of the genocide committed on them 100 years ago in 1948, 1967, and they have been accumulated in that one of the most contested area in the world. Secondly, the Madrid conference have given the Palestinian recognized in 1992 Israel as a state. The PLO have taken the authorities, and there was 2-state solution. And in fact, Oslo agreement have mentioned that 5 years down the line there will be a viable Palestinian state, and that's why Yasser Arafat have agreed to it. But then Israel said Yasser Arafat is not a man of peace, and then also they said then Mahmoud Abbas not man of peace. Then they have promoted Hamas, and where Netanyahu has siphoned enough money from the money that has been poured into Hamas. And we all know all the stories, John. Let's recognize it that there's a case against Netanyahu inside Israel that he has taken money from the Hamas money, which has been came to Hamas through the Qatari government. So therefore, there is a question here. Did the war start on Palestinian violation of the war? I'm sure you are wrong here again. Not the 7th October. 600 Palestinians were killed with the ceasefire by the Israeli. 70 people were killed in the West Bank by the Israeli. All this provocation by the right-wing parties in Israel against the Palestinians. You expected the Palestinians to sit quiet. I'm not defending Hamas. I'm not friend of Hamas at all. But I'm talking about Palestinians who have been suffering for the last 100 years at the hand of Israeli occupation, denying them their statehood of existence. We are not calling Israeli to go to out of the country. They have the full right to exist, but you cannot expect them to have a Jew state without the Palestinian. Let us also be more realistic in putting it more in the continuous, that perpetual provocation will make it a permanent war in the Middle East. And Israel has to stop this provocation. And Neha, only Netanyahu can stop this war. Nobody else can stop it because he is the spoiled boy of the United States.
You're right, sir, but the trouble is there are many who believe that Netanyahu does not want to end this war because it serves his political interests, it helps him cling to power longer, he does not want to hold an election in his country, and frankly that sounds extremely ominous. Therefore, the United States needs to step up to the plate and tell their best friend Netanyahu that this has gone way too far and it is not acceptable anymore. And as far as the rest of the world is concerned, well, yes, all of us really need to rise to the occasion and raise our voice against what's happening in Gaza right now. Too many people have died. People are literally starving to death in Gaza. We cannot let this happen right before our eyes. On that note, Professor Scott Lucas, Dr. Wael Awad and John Rosamando, thank you so much to all three of you for joining me on Global Pulse tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Well, recognition of a Palestinian statehood may certainly be a big diplomatic boost for Palestinians, but at the end of the day, the priority has to be to end the starvation crisis that has engulfed Gaza. And therefore, it is important for the entire international community to speak in one voice and say, thus far, no further. This is Neha Khanna signing off on Global Pulse. Thanks so much for watching.